Today we're doing an all-grain brew of a Belgian Saison. Let's just take a quick look at our recipe. So this is a Belgian Saison. It's adapted from a David Heath recipe, and it's not very far different from his recipe. I've swapped out my equipment profile for his equipment profile, and that's changed a few things around as well. It scaled the recipe a little bit, but hasn't made too many changes. If we take a look at the BJCP guideline, the 2021 style guideline for a Saison, it's a family of refreshing, highly attenuated, hoppy and fairly bitter Belgian ales. It says it's a family because every farmhouse would have their own version or a slightly different version of a Saison. And the Saison was served throughout the day. It wasn't just served at night, it was served through the day in the field as a low alcohol beverage. So probably around 1 or 2%. And then later in the day, you might have had, say, a mid-strength as a thirst crusher. And then in the evening, you'd have a stronger version as the table beer. The BJCP style guideline, for that reason, gives you a fairly wide berth of what you can do with it. The ABV can be anywhere from 3.5 to 9.5%. So the 9.5 getting up with those very strong Belgian beers like the Trippels and the Trappists. The OGs and FGs are there on the screen. IBUs 20 to 35, so from slight bitterness through to sort of a moderate bitterness, and the EBC goes from light through to almost a dark beer. 43.5 EBC is a fairly dark beer. Now you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there the version that I'm brewing. The estimated ABV is 6.4%. We've got an EBC of 25, so it should come out a nice amber colour. The IBUs are 27, so it's the middle of that range, and the BU to GU ratio is 0.5, so it should come out nicely balanced. Now, the aroma, you should have those fruity, spicy, herby notes. There is coriander seed, there's orange peel, and traditionally seeds of paradise, though I couldn't get a hold of seeds of paradise, so I've substituted them. But you get those herbal notes through it, and it is quite an attractive beer on the nose. It's not just your standard malt and hop nose bouquet. The appearance can be pale gold to deep amber. Flavour, again, it should be balanced. So there should be a slight fruitiness, a bit of that spiciness, some hoppy bitterness, some grain malt. You should still be able to taste the grain malt in there. Yeah, so that's the BJCP style guideline in a nutshell. So what have I done with the recipe? Well, not a lot. We've got 64% pale malt. We've got 10% Munich 1. We've got 6.6% honey. And that honey is local honey. It's honey that's come out of my hives. We've got Cara Munich 2, Carapils, wheat malt. Now, the Carapils and wheat malt should help with head retention and body and mouthfeel. And we've got candy sugar in there as well. Now, this recipe calls for clear and dark candy sugar. I don't have any dark candy sugar. I do have some clear candy sugar from a batch that I brewed about 12 months ago, and that keeps nicely in the fridge. So that's what I'm using in this recipe. And I'm just going to bump that up, so 230 grams instead of the 170. And Dingerman's Special B. As far as hops go, that's where I've made a slight change. David's recipe called for those summer Saaz hops. I can't get them here in Australia, or I haven't been able to get them. So I've just gone for 75 grams of Saaz, and the hops that I've sourced are 3.3%. So I've adjusted the amount of hops on there to make sure that I get that right IBU. And then another 25 grams in the hop stand just to give an aroma, a hop aroma. Looking at the other additives, apart from your normal stuff, your water conditioners, we've got 15.8 grams of coriander seed, 7.9 grams of bitter orange peel, and 15.8 grams of sweet orange peel. And as I said, instead of the 3.3 grams of seeds of paradise, I've substituted 1.5 grams of cardamom and 1.8 grams of black pepper. Now the coriander, cardamom and black pepper all went into a mortar and pestle and have been ground. And that's going to be added in the last 5 minutes of the boil, just to get those oils, those essential oils from those seeds into the wort. Now the yeast, this calls for a co-pitch of both the Hornendal Kwijk, I got corrected the other day, it's Hornendal Kwijk yeast and the Belgian Saison 2 yeast. So I've gone with White Labs for both of those. I really like the White Labs, especially the new Pure Pitch, which has got twice the amount of yeast in the pack compared to the old packaging. They are fairly expensive, so it does make this an expensive beer to brew, but I am going for that Saison authenticity, and I am planning on reusing that yeast as well. So at the end of the fermentation, I'm going to wash that yeast and save it, and I will be doing this. I've got a feeling that I'm going to like this beer, so I'm probably going to make this maybe a few more times, just to kind of dial it in myself. Our mash profile, we've got a strike temperature of 66 Celsius. The first stage of the mash is at 62, second stage at 68, both for 30 minutes, and then we've got a mash out at 75, followed by a 60-minute boil where we'll add those two hop additions. Once fermentation's finished, I will force carb it in the keg and then leave it to condition for about 4 weeks before decanting. So now that we know what we're doing, let's get on with the brew day. I've heated my strike water up, but we're on tank water here, and I treat this tank water like RO water because it's basically got nothing in it. So I've measured out my salts. All the additions are in here. My strike water is up to temperature, so I'm just going to add the salts. I'm just adding all the grains in at once. Not too fast. There will be dough balls, but I've got a secret weapon against dough balls. Here's my secret weapon. Actually, I might put that on slow. Switch it up to high. That is something to behold. Okay, so that's doughed in now. Mashed in, whatever phrase you want to use. And I'm just going to leave that to sit and rest for 10 minutes. Okay, so the strike water temperature was 66 degrees. And I find this a lot with the Brewzilla. I'm not sure why, because I've done the calculations. Strike temperature was 66. The mash temperature is supposed to be 62. But it's only dropped to 64. So it hasn't dropped as low as it was expecting to. I've turned both elements off for the time being. I'll adjust the temperature on the Brewzilla down to 62 now. And that's for 30 minutes. And then the second step takes it up to 68 degrees for 30 minutes as well. And then we've got mash out at 75 for 10 minutes. We're 10 minutes into our mash. So now I turn the pump on to start the recirculation. And that's recirculating. I might just dial it back a little. In 20 minutes we ramp the temperature up to 68 Celsius. We've been recirculating the wort now for 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is just take that out and get myself a small sample. And I have my handy dandy pH meter and just sit this in the wort for a couple of minutes and just measure the pH. And that's holding steady at 5.25. So I'm happy with that. I'm not going to make any adjustments to that. That's a good pH. Okay, my brewfather alarm's just gone off, telling me to heat the mash now to 68 degrees Celsius, so I'll do that. Okay, my next alarm has gone off. Heat mash to 75 degrees for mash out. So now it wants us to sparge with 8.9 litres of water to get a pre-boil volume of 28 litres. I've got my jug sitting up there. I'll put the first 3 lots of water in and allow it to sparge. I like sparging over a bit of time, so I don't mind that I've got to keep reboiling the jug and that it takes a little while. And that gives all of those sugars time to wash down through the grain bed. So what I'll do is after the 3rd jug of water, I'll check how much volume's in there and I'll see how much more I need to sparge. We just let that drain down. Once that's finished draining, I'll start the first lot of sparging. And when you do that, you want to spread it out over the grain bed so that you get an even flow through and you get all of those sugars out of the grains. Now the jug that I use has different temperature settings. It doesn't go as low as 75, which is the sparge, but it does go to 80. I'm not too worried about 5 degrees difference. It's not going to make that much difference today. We're a fair way under, so I'm going to add all of the sparge water. That'll bring us up to 27 litres. At that point, I'll check the specific gravity as well and see whether I need to add any more water or if I'm happy with it at that level. And when I take that off, it sits over this bucket that I've put all the things in I've been using, and it just drains any wort into there so that I don't lose any of that. Okay, so I finished the sparge, so I'm going to do 2 things now. First, I'm going to bump the heat up to start the boil, and second is I'm going to take a gravity reading just to see what our pre-boil gravity is, compare that with the pre-boil volume, and just make any adjustments that I need to in the boil. And that's just gone back sitting in my bucket just to collect any little, last remnants of the wort. You put that on the slide, cover over, and look through and read. Just as a backup and insurance policy, I'm going to take a sample with a hydrometer as well, just to double check and make sure that my refractometer's not out. I'm going to wait for this to cool down. I'm going to throw this into my fridge, let it cool down. After waiting for that hydrometer sample to cool down, it came within 4 points of the gravity that I was aiming for, so that's good. Looks like it's time to get a new refractometer. And in the meantime, the chooks are going to love all that grain. The horses might get some as a treat too. Because it's been, here's the thing for horse owners, because most of the starches and sugars have been taken out of the grain, you're left with the fibre and the roughage. So it's not so, like I wouldn't feed them on this, but it's not so bad for them as a treat. It's taking a while to heat up. It's only just hit 90 degrees and we're getting the hot break forming. So that foaminess on top there will start to break away just as the wort comes to a boil. That's the hot break. So at 10:41 and nearly at our 28 litres pre-boil volume, we're doing pretty good at the moment. So the lid goes back on and hopefully that keeps some heat in. Okay, we've got a good boil going here now. So I'm going to add my 60-minute addition of Saison hops. So first we're going to measure out our 5-minute addition. And that's because I just got the Belgian candy syrup out of the fridge and the bottom third of it has actually candied. Ironic. So we're going to do our 5-minute additions first. I've just stuck it in some hot water and we'll just wait for it to loosen up, and in 5 minutes it should be ready to go. Our 10-minute alarm has just gone off. So now we add in the combination honey and candy sugar. Now we want to add this slowly because what we don't want is for this just to drip in a big clump straight down the bottom and sit on top of that element and scorch. So we add it in slowly and spread it around. And that boiling wort will help to dilute it and mix it. And as I suspected, our boil off rate's been a bit high. We're down to about 26 and a bit litres. And just dunk the container in there to clean out all the honey and sugar that's stuck to the sides. Because it takes a little while to get that in, we're only a couple of minutes away from our 5-minute addition. That's our 5-minute alarm. In goes the 5-minute addition. Now I might just get my spoon and just give that a bit of a stir. So now we're only 5 minutes to flame out. That's it, no alarm, but that's the end of our boil. So we go to flame out. And as soon as that settles down, what I'm going to do is sanitize the counterflow chiller. I've already run water through it. I want to change the temperature. I want to knock it down to 90 degrees so it holds 90 degrees for the whirlpool. But what I'm going to do now is turn the pump back on and pump hot wort through the counterflow chiller. So it'll go down out of this pipe around the counterflow chiller and back up. Not to start cooling it down, but just to sanitize that counterflow chiller. Now we're at we lost 2.5 litres. So yes, the boil off rate was a lot higher. So now we're running hot wort through there for 5 minutes to make sure that it's completely sanitized. I'll turn the elements back on. In goes our final addition of Saison hops. That's our 10-minute hop stand done. So it's time to turn the pump off. I have my thermometer ready. I'll just loosen that off and start the wort running through. Okay, that's coming out at 27 degrees, 28 degrees. So that's fine. I'll turn the pump off for now and go and get the fermenter. There it is, it's in the wrapped fermentation chamber. I'm going to leave that. I'm just going to close the door, let the fridge cool it down, and once it reaches a decent pitching temperature, around 22, I like for Kvike, and Quike, however it's pronounced, and also the Belgian Saison yeast. They both get pitched, it's being dual pitched with both those yeasts, both those strains. It's about 3 weeks since I put the Saison on. It only took about 8 to 10 days to fully ferment. If you look at the readout there, it's saying it went down to 0.997. I don't quite believe that. I think there's a little bit of inaccuracy. I don't think I've calibrated the pill, wrapped pill in there properly, so I'm going to have another go at doing that. However, it is fully fermented. It stopped fermenting about a week and a half ago. I've let it stay in there. I crashed it down to 1 degree. I did have to move things around in the fermentation chamber a little bit, and I did disturb the truth. So I gave it a few extra days just to settle down and to clarify out, and it's come up pretty nice. It looks dark in there at the moment, but experience tells me that that is quite a nice colour. As it comes through the lines, you'll be able to see through that. It's quite a nice, sort of light amber colour. This is going into a mini comp. So I'm taking 4 bottles, 2 1.5 litres and 2 750 mils. What I'm interested in though is seeing how it's turned out. So I've cleaned and sanitized the bottles. I've put 2 carb drops in each of the bottles. I've cleaned and sanitized all of my lines, all of my disconnects, the keg, everything that I'm using today is being cleaned and sanitized. All I really need to do now is hook up the party tap, hook up the gas, and then fill 4 of these bottles with the Saison. I didn't ferment under pressure, so it's not carbonated yet. I've got my gas bottle ready to go, so let's get on with it. Okay, so as I've connected that, because the gas was turned on to about 10 psi when I was clearing the keg, it's pushing CO2 into the fermenter. Now I'm going to hook up the party tap. Now, a tip that I was given when I was at the Brisbane Amateur Brewers AGM the other night was that for Saisons and beers like that, he prefers to actually bottle condition them because it gives them a little bit more body. Like I was saying before, there will be a little bit of oxygen contact. Originally, these beers would have been open fermented or fermented in a barrel, and you wouldn't have been able to avoid oxygen content, or contact rather, when you were transferring them to the bottle. So traditionally I expect that there's going to be a little bit of oxidization, but any oxygen that gets absorbed into the beer here should pretty much be cleared up by the yeast when it kicks off. So that's it, that's our 4 bottles filled. But what I am also going to do, while I just step off here a second, is grab a hydrometer. I do have to find a better way to organise those drawers. It is a bit of a pain sometimes. I'm going to have to use my larger one. And I'm not cleaning or sanitising these because I'm actually going to taste it. I want to see what it tastes like at the moment. Oh, it is pretty dry. That hasn't lifted off the bottom yet. There we go. And it is also just lightly carbonated. You can see the head that's poured off that. It shouldn't have been, because I only had it at about half a psi, just enough to make sure that nothing would get back in, but enough to let carbon dioxide out. Okay, that is done. Now just bear with me a second while I swap my hoses over. Okay, so the gas stays on there to push it out. This connects to the outpost on your corny keg. And if you look, I'll put a link to where I've done a video on oxygen-free transfers so that you can see why I'm hooking it up this way. Okay, that's on. Now I just need a gas disconnect. Okay, I'll slow that down a little bit. Okay, so you can see from that, that's a nice light colour. You can see from here, hopefully you can see from here, it is a very nice amber. Quite happy with that. And it is slightly carbonated already. So I'm going to have to give it a stir to get some of those bubbles out. So that slowed down because, again, because this is cold, this is warm. You can see the condensation creeping up the side of the keg there. I don't have to worry about overfilling this keg because I don't have enough in here to overfill it. It is very dry. Not quite 997, but 1002. There's still some bubbles coming up, a bit of effervescence on there. Yep, I'm going to call that 1002. It doesn't taste dry, surprisingly. Oh, yum. It does have a malty nose. Not too much hop. Barely any, actually. It's mostly the malts I'm getting. Hints of that orange peel, definitely. And the coriander's in the background. It's very nice. It's very mature now. It's ready to drink. That is delicious. I could drink that all day. Oh, there we go. That's the end of it. The other thing that I need to do now also is go back into Brewfather and unpair or unattach, or detach, in fact, that device from this brew so that it doesn't keep recording and give me some strange readings. This, I'm actually going, I really like that beer so much, I'm going to save that yeast. So there'll be a video coming out shortly on how to wash your yeast, how to clean it, how to prepare it, and get it ready so that you can reuse it. That's done a really good job. That was the White Labs Belgian Saison yeast, and it's done a fantastic job. I'm really happy with that. That's my first Saison. I wasn't sure how it was going to come out. I didn't have dried orange peel, I only had powder. So I wasn't sure whether I'd put too much powder in, not enough, but I think I'm getting just enough of that orange flavour there. The coriander's coming through nice. For a first attempt, I'm bloody happy with that. Bloody oath. Anyway, clean up time now. And the only thing left to do is, once that's properly carbonated, because a Saison is supposed to be a highly carbonated beer, so once that's properly carbonated, I'm going to do a tasting. What I'll do is they'll go into my bomb shelter, which is a black plastic tub with a lid on it. I call it the bomb shelter because these things have a habit of exploding if you overcarbonate them. And now, because this is already effervescent and slightly carbonated, there's a risk that these smaller bottles might overcarbonate. So what I will do is every day or two I'll come along. At the moment I can squeeze that. As soon as it feels like an unopened Coke bottle, that tells me that it has carbonated. I'll probably leave it an extra day because, like I said, this is supposed to be a highly carbonated style. And once that happens, I'll throw it back into the fridge to stop any more fermentation and stop the risk of it exploding. And at that point, it'll be ready for the comp. All I have to do then is take it out when I'm ready, have a taste, and see which one I like, the highly carbonated or the slightly less carbonated 1.5 litre bottle. And now for the tasting. I've got 3 different versions of this Saison here. One is off the keg, it's been force carbed. The next one is 2 carb drops into 750 mils and then bottle conditioned for a couple of weeks and then conditioned in the fridge for 2 more weeks. And the final version is 2 carb drops into 1 litre. So the only difference between these should be that there's a different carbonation level, and that's why I'm doing this, to see which carbonation level I prefer. Force carbed, bottle conditioned in 750 mils or bottle conditioned in 1 litre. Now, For the keg version, we've got quite a good fluffy head. It has dropped a little in the last 30 seconds, but it's holding up quite nicely. It's quite a nice, well-structured head. There's quite a fair bit of carbonation in there. You would say that that is highly carbonated, as the style should be. Now on the nose, I'm getting that coriander, but not a lot else. And it might be the head that's interfering with that. I mightn't be getting a lot of smell off that. Now this is chilled to 6 degrees, 5 degrees actually, in the kegerator at the moment. So not over chilled, it's cold, but it's not chilled to the point where you'll lose all the flavour and aroma. But all I'm getting on the nose at the moment is that cardamom. Sorry, not the cardamom, the coriander. Oh, it's still beautiful. The bitter orange has dropped off a little bit in the last couple of weeks. So it's not quite as bitter. You're getting that sweet orange starting to come through. You're definitely still getting the coriander. It's not Galen's favourite beer. She doesn't like things that have got herbs in them. That's just not her jam. But I do like it. I like that coriander flavour in there. I'm starting to get a hint of the pepper in there as well. Next time I'm going to try and get the Seeds of Paradise and see if they make much of a difference. It's a nice rich mouthfeel. Not overly thick. It's not a heavy mouthfeel. It is quite a... Well, it's above a standard strength beer. It's about 6.1, 6.2%. So it is quite high in alcohol, but you're not getting any alcohol burn or that cloying alcohol effect. The bitterness from the hop and from the orange is balancing that out quite nicely. I could drink that again, and I'll definitely be making it again. Now, before I get too carried away, I'm going to open the next one. Now I am going to get a towel, because the last time I opened a Cooper's that had been carved with 2 carb drops, I got a gusher. So I'm just going to take it easy. Oh, disappointing. They are quite hard, but there was no real outlet of gas when that came up. Oh, it is quite different to the pour. That's interesting. Now, as far as the colour goes, this is a nice amber. It's a little cloudy. This is clearer. The head isn't quite as well structured, but there's more carbonation in it. There's a lot more. There's a lot more bubbles coming up to the surface. There's a little bit more of that orange bitterness in this one. The head hasn't lasted quite as long. And I don't know if you can pick that up. Let me get a breadboard and stick in behind that. I'm not sure if you'll pick that up, but there is there's at least 2 shades difference in the colour of these two. This one I'm finding is just a little bit sweeter. And it wouldn't be sweetness from the carb drops, because they would have been consumed by the yeast. I think it's the carbonation itself, because it's not a forced carbonation. It is that bottle style fermentation does come across a little bit sweeter. So again, a very nice example. And I'm really glad that I bottle conditioned that one, because what I'm going to be doing in the future is possibly a larger batch, keg 19 litres, and then bottle condition the rest. Okay, the final one. This is probably not going to be as carbonated. Although it's not far off. Not quite. There were a lot more bubbles rising to the surface on the 750ml version. And the head is collapsing a lot quicker. That's still nicely carbonated. And this is cloudy. I don't understand that. I don't understand how the keg version came out cloudier than the bottle conditioned version. One of these sweet mysteries of life, I suppose. Yep, getting the same aroma. It's that coriander aroma. There's a little bit more sweetness. I say I'm leaning towards this version. There's a little more flavour in that version. And I don't know why that is. I don't know the chemistry behind it. But I'm definitely getting more of the orange in there. The bitter orange has almost disappeared completely from this one. You're getting more of the bitter orange in here. And some of the coriander. And that's more sweet orange. That's interesting. So that the bottles and the amount of carbonation drops in them has obviously played an effect on there as well. So which version am I going to be sending off to the mini comp? Definitely that version. I think I got a better structured head there. I definitely got more carbonation there, and there's still quite a bit of carbonation in that glass. And it's supposed to be a highly carbonated style. And not quite as much carbonation there. There aren't the big bubbles in here that there are in here. And this was poured a good minute or two earlier. Yep, that's the one. That's the one that's going off. Now, I've opened these, so I have to drink them. But I have to have some tea first. Dinner tea, whatever you want to call it. Supper, some people call it. That is definitely one of my favourite beers that I've made. It's hard to find fault in any of them. Obviously with this one, it's the cloudiness. If I sent that off, it would definitely get marked down on the cloudiness. With this one, it's almost perfect. It's nice and clear. It's still got bubbles in it. The head was good when it was poured. I can't say too much bad about that one. This one again, if you're comparing colour, let me put that board behind them. No, there's not much difference in colour between these two. Definitely no difference in clarity. But it's not quite as carbonated, which makes me want to send that one off. And I'm getting a little bit more of the bitter orange in there, which is a nice balance to the alcohol. Well, that's it. That's wrapped up this grain to glass episode for the Belgian Saison. If you've enjoyed the episode, give us a like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you find out when we're releasing new videos. If you know somebody who's into home brewing or just starting out on home brewing, send them our way, tell them about the channel, And we'll be covering a lot of concepts, and there's already a fair bit of material on the channel to take you from a rank beginner, never brewed before, through to some fairly complex topics and things that will make home brewing a lot better. If you know somebody who's an average home brewer but is keen, tell them about the channel as well, because I'm sure there's something in here that they're going to pick up. Enjoy the hobby, but drink responsibly. And I'm not sure how the Dutch say cheers. How do the Dutch say cheers? Oh, they say proost as well. Proost.